Whilst the gameplay that you're about to see is from a story mission that also features a boss, you won't see gameplay of the boss fight and there will be no major story spoilers. Now then guys, hello, or should I say hello? Okay, so this is gameplay of HARLOWE past level 30. It includes augments, capstones, all of the abilities, essentially just all of the cool stuff that she's able to do. And the gameplay in the background is from the mission Rush the Gate, which is in the campaign. It's towards the end of the Fade Field zone. And what I essentially did is leave it late as possible, did a lot of side quests, did a lot of other zones and stuff, leveled up before I did this mission, because this is the only mission I can show so far. To also be clear, this isn't endgame content, this isn't New Game Plus, this isn't a guide on how to play HARLOWE, and I can't really talk about how good they were for leveling or how good the skill trees are outside of the gameplay that I'm showing you. So I figured it was a good chance to just show off the augments and basically everything HARLOWE can do. These videos do take a lot of effort to make and a lot of time to get all of the gameplay. So if you want to see more, like and subscribe. We still have the VEX and AMON video to come out. And yeah, just keep sharing these videos out. I want to make as much cool stuff as I can from this embargoed gameplay. But before I get onto the red tree, creative bursts for HARLOWE, we need to talk about the trait, which is something I missed for RAFA. Her trait is Entanglement. Whenever HARLOWE uses her action skill on enemies, those enemies become entangled, where they share a portion of gun damage and skill damage with other entangled enemies, 7% of dealt damage at base level. But of course you can buff it up with talents and various augments. And you can do the same thing for the ability in this trait as well, which is Chroma Accelerator, where you fire a big energy blast from HARLOWE's Chroma Accelerator. When it passes through enemies, it deals cryo freezing damage to all enemies it passes through, and also near. But if you press the button again, you do this big explosive radiation damage, Nova, I suppose, in this area. This also happens if it hits a wall and can't travel, but otherwise it will travel for pretty much as long as it can, up until that detonation time runs out, and then it will explode manually anyway. Not to mention the augments could also change a lot about some of the elemental effects, which brings us onto the first one of this tree, Void Star. Whenever HARLOWE's unstable energy pocket passes by an enemy, it loses a portion of its total health, 30% total, as kinetic damage, and then they become frozen. So they don't take cryo damage to get frozen, it's specifically kinetic damage. It's also a bit weird that it says passes by instead of not through, but it seems to work fine when it passes through them anyway. The second augment in this tree is Neutron Capture. All damage HARLOWE's pocket deals to enemies is stored, and whenever it explodes at the end, a portion of that stored damage is transferred to HARLOWE's gun, causing her to deal bonus radiation damage, and that's 10% of action skill damage dealt. The gameplay that is in the background as well was me running like a radiation build, and you can just see how much I'm destroying people after that explosion comes in. Really cool augment and synergizes a lot with some of the stuff within this tree. Going deeper into the creative bursts, red tree brings us to the left-hand branch with field research. Whenever HARLOWE kills an enemy with her energy pocket, and when she kills an entangled enemy whilst the pocket is active and I guess traveling, you refund a portion of the next action skill cooldown, 20% per enemy killed. It's a little bit glitchy in the gameplay. This is probably my only complaint with some of the stuff here, is you can sort of see it says like 38 seconds and then jumps down to 22. And so it can be a little bit turbulent, I suppose, on how much you actually get back. And sometimes I've even seen the cooldown timer go up as well, based on like cooldown charge rate and stuff as a stat. It can be a little bit screwy, I suppose. But the middle augment for that branch is Special Purpose Magnets. The energy pocket pulls enemies along as it passes by, and then its detonation deals increased damage for every enemy it has already hit. There's no maximum stacks on this, it is just plus 8% per enemy hit. So yeah, it could really start to stack up if you want to get those big explosions in. And finally, we have Containment Breach. Whenever HARLOWE's pocket detonates, it splits into smaller, fast-moving, unstable energy pockets. Basically explodes into chunks, extra projectiles. And you can sort of see a couple of them. They're kind of hard to spot because they do travel fast. But yeah, cool augment. But the Capstones is really where it's at. One of the reasons why I wanted to leave it to level 30 is to show off some of these just ability altering traits that you can go for once you max out these trees. And the first one is Cue Ball. And the energy pocket now, instead of traveling in a straight line, it now bounces as it travels, and you can no longer manually detonate it. Each time it bounces, it creates a radiation explosion, and whenever it strikes an enemy, it changes direction and bounces towards another enemy. That last bit is really key. If you throw it out and it doesn't hit an enemy, it will just bounce in crazy ways, and like you see on screen, just kind of do its own thing and not be of any use. However, if it hits an enemy, it will start homing in onto nearby people, and yeah, you can see just how crazy this is in the end. And when you start matching it with augments and stuff that reduce your cooldown based on how many enemies get entangled or die because of the energy pocket, you can just keep throwing this out consistently. This is amazing. I cannot wait to play with it more. But we still have so much to get through. The middle capstone is Demon Core. As Harlow's pocket travels, it shoots radiation darts at enemies, and whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy whilst the action skill is active, it automatically irradiates that enemy. Really good again if you're going for those radiation builds, and you can sort of see these darts flying out. Not too flashy, but I do think it's still going to be really impactful. And finally, we have Shattering Light. Charge skill now. Instead of Chrome Accelerator just blasting out once, you can now essentially save it to 5 charges. If you hold F, you can end it early and actually refund a portion of the cooldown back, but it turns it from a one blast big explosion and breaks it down into 5 charges. It does increase the cooldown a little bit, but a really cool augment too if you want to do more consistent damage instead of one big one. Now let's move on to the blue tree, which is Seize the Day for Harlowe, and the ability in it is 0 point. You press F to use Harlowe's Halo Accelerator to place an enemy in stasis for a set duration. Enemies immune to stasis take damage instead. So big bosses, for example. You can also press the action button again to slam enemies down onto the ground in the direction that Harlowe is facing, and it creates a small explosion. Retriggering stasis does have a brief cooldown of 1.5 to 2 seconds. At base level, if an enemy dies whilst in stasis, it will just run out, and you'll have to wait 35 seconds for it to be in use again. And if you're out of range of any enemies when you try and use 0 point, it will just go on like a 3-second, 4-second cooldown before you can use it again. So you have to be really careful with it. But some of the augments do help out. Strange Attractor is one. Whenever Harlowe shoots an enemy with a gun, bullets ricochet off of that enemy onto all enemies within stasis, as you're seeing on screen. If Harlowe critically hits an enemy, that enemy becomes entangled. This is specifically when an enemy is in stasis, that if you critically hit them, an enemy becomes entangled. But there are talents as well later on in the tree that allow you that when you critically hit them, they can become entangled too. So Jacob's fans rejoice. Peer review is the next door neighbor for the augment here in the blue tree. Whenever an enemy enters stasis, you spawn a little homing rejuvenating projectile that targets Harlowe or her allies once the enemy is slammed, killed, or the stasis ends. You'll see it just sort of hovering around the person within stasis, and as soon as you throw them down, these projectiles fly down and they decrease your action skill duration rate and increase action skill cooldown rate for a duration. This is what I mean with you look at the cooldown for some abilities, it can be a little bit jumpy because it's not reducing a cooldown, it's increasing action skill cooldown rate. It's a bit weird, but you'll sort of see from the gameplay these projectiles coming down. I think they're meant to home on to Harlowe and allies, but they don't really. And one of my complaints about this augment is just it's kind of hard to see when it's in use, but it's there. It might just take some getting used to. Going further on, we have the Wildcat Destabilization augment, where entangled enemies take bonus radiation damage from entangle, and whenever Harlowe deals radiation gun damage to an enemy, it restores action skill duration. When Harlowe kills an enemy within stasis, it creates a radiation nova, and this deals damage based on remaining action skill duration too. I don't want to say too much about speculating really, but I think this is one you have to specifically build around to get the most out of it, but once you do, it might be just one of the best. But kind of hard to show in gameplay. Cold Storage is the middle augment. All damage dealt to enemies in stasis is stored. Whenever an enemy is slammed or stasis ends, it creates a cryo explosion based on all stored damage centered on that enemy. And it also automatically freezes other enemies nearby. Stored damage is a weird one. You can see me doing damage to the person in stasis, but it's not storing the damage, it's still killing them. So I don't know if it works as intended or not, is what I'm saying. The final augment here is Inertia. Whenever an enemy that Harlowe has in stasis dies, a new enemy is automatically added to stasis. Whenever this happens, the duration resets, but it drains a lot faster. Again, just gameplay. We've seen this before in previous Siren Phase Grasp gameplay. It's a really nice augment, full stop. But now the Capstones. Falling Bodies is the first one on the left-hand side, where you can place additional enemies within stasis at the cost of action skill duration. Whenever the stasis ends, automatically slam all enemies straight down. This actually really synergized well with the peer review augment, where you get these rejuvenating projectiles, because you can get multiple rejuvenating projectiles that all hit you and reduce your cooldown if you're getting multiple people with the Falling Bodies capstone. It means that you can't manually slam down enemies anymore. But yeah, naturally, this was a fun capstone to play with. Cold Plunge is the middle capstone that whenever Harlowe slams an enemy down on the ground, it creates a singularity on that enemy followed by a big cryo explosion, and it doesn't really seem to be a cooldown on just spamming this out, but it's fairly standard. And then Ground State, every time Harlowe slams an enemy, they gain increased slam damage and slam damage radius. Enemies in stasis take decreased damage, however, and the slam, instead of it going wherever you're looking, it will just slam straight down. So you have to be very specific on the target that you want to get, because if you do slam them, it's only going to slam straight down, you can't move them. And the last tree is Flux Generator, where you throw down this generator in front of you, and it projects an energy field, dealing cryo damage over time and entangling enemies within its radius. Allies within the field also gain overshield. You can also pick and keep moving up the Flux Generator to toss it again. It's not completely static, and there's no real cooldown for you to just keep throwing out this Flux Generator to keep it moving forward. It does have a pretty beefy cooldown of 55 seconds though. But moving on to the augments, Coronal Mass Ejection is the first one. Enemies inside the Flux Generator's radius lose all elemental resistances, and Harlowe actually gains increased status effect chance. So good for elemental builds, easier chance to freeze, to shock, to put them on fire, etc. The augment next to it in the main branch of this tree is Blue Giant, where Harlowe's Flux Generator increases its radius, and additionally, whenever she re-triggers the Flux Generator, i.e. starts moving it, she creates a cryo hazard where the Flux Generator was, and a radiation hazard wherever she places the new version of the Flux Generator. Only one of these hazards can be active at a time. You can see from the gameplay just how that looks, just really handy for doing some more elemental damage, and the hazard duration is about 5 seconds. Unified Fury is next up. The Flux Generator gains increased action skill damage, and this effect is increased based on how many allies or enemies are inside the Flux Generator. 10% per ally and enemy within the radius. Playing alone, you don't get as much out of this naturally, but if you're in these big fights, there's no maximum stacks on this, so there's probably a lot of damage that you can end up doing. But it is specifically that the Flux Generator gains increased action skill damage, not that you gain more damage too. Middle augment is Nuclear Winter. Whenever Harlowe and her allies are inside the Flux Generator's radius, they deal bonus cryo damage. Whenever Harlowe and her allies leave the Flux Generator, you start dealing bonus radiation damage for a duration of 12 seconds. And whenever you inflict cryo or radiation status, that enemy becomes entangled too. It specifically does says allies leave the Flux Generator radius, so I don't know if you have to be in it to begin with and then leave for you to get the bonus radiation damage. It's a little bit weirdly worded. But you can see from the gameplay just the brief bits of cryo damage that I'm doing when I'm inside the radius of the generator, and maybe potentially some bonus radiation damage when I go out of it. And the final augment to go over is Perpetual Engine. When Harlowe activates the Flux Generator, she gains damage reduction and increased action skill duration for each entangled enemy, and each additional enemy she entangles whilst the action skill is active. So it makes you a bit tankier, and it also keeps the duration going. But naturally, it can impact some of the capstones, starting with Potential Transference, where now you have charges, actually, of being able to throw down the Flux Generator, but you can throw it at a good distance. Wherever you're looking on your crosshair, you can consume a charge and create the shock burst and the teleport for the Flux Generator to go in that direction. It also grants a free second wind to allies, and it heals allies within the Flux Generator area too. The middle capstone is Violent Horizon. Harlowe's Flux Generator occasionally shoots these radiation projectiles at nearby enemies outside of its radius, and if these projectiles irradiate an enemy, the Flux Generator then drags them within its radius and pulls them in. You can also re-trigger the Flux Generator to create a singularity where it's based, to drag in nearby enemies and also increase action skill power. However, with this one, what it doesn't say is you can't move it anymore. Basically, wherever you place it, you cannot move it any further, because when you re-trigger it, all it's going to do is create a singularity. So you have to be very careful with where you place it, and the cooldown is even higher as well at 60 seconds. And the final capstone, I am saving the best till last, is Group Study, where HARLOWE spawns a Halo sidekick for each ally instead of a flux generator. The sidekicks automatically fly to each ally and they hover near them, granting them increased gun damage, fire rate, and reload speed. You can also re-trigger the sidekicks to overload them and increase their effects, where these effects stack. I don't think there's a maximum stacks that they can have, but it will cause the duration of the action skill to drain faster. This was one of the big things that we were, as a community, curious about, because it does seem like it's based around like group play, but playing this on your own, it's also really strong, especially if you're going for like a gun build, increasing gun damage, fire rate, and reload speed that you could just keep upping and upping. If you get a good gun, you could do some really cool stuff with it. And again, this was one of the capstones that I was really happy to try out and play a little bit more, and I can't wait to show more of it. But that's all I'm going to show today. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you want to see VEX or AMON for the next video, I'm leaning towards VEX because they're a little bit higher leveled up. I still need to catch up on AMON. I would show more gameplay, but I'm essentially limited to how much I can show before the launch of the game. So I'm trying to keep these videos as quick and concise as possible. But if you appreciate the content, please like and subscribe, share it around. It would mean a hell of a lot to me. But thanks again, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next one. Bye!